Welcome back, fake Orioles fans. Here to report on how the champs are doing in the offseason. It is January 24th, 2033, so through most of the offseason, I wanted to give an update on what the team has done. I'd say the two main things are this. One, last update I talked about it being important to continue to be a deep organization and kind of deciding how to do that with the escalating costs and some guys leaving as free agents. And so the way it ended up working out with the signings that I made and trades, etc., which we'll get to in a minute, with the signings on the Major League club, I kind of added depth through the bottom of the market. Like, I didn't go out and add a starting shortstop to retain Adele Almador, who I didn't bring back and won too much money. Instead, I went and I got kind of like a utility infielder and a couple guys who can be in AAA, etc. So some guys who were on my Major League team last year will go into elevated roles, and then the depth will come in below them. Same thing with the pitching, as you'll see. Didn't really dive into the top end of the market, more went to the bottom of the market to beef up the back end of my rotation rather than the top end, because I feel like I have multiple top end of the rotation arms. So I did that. And the other thing I did was just with the typical roster churn I do, where it's guys who are on my 40-man and are kind of like fringe major leaguers, but more minor league depth for when injuries or slumps or trades happen. When those guys are out of minor league options, I tend to move them out. And for guys who have minor league options, just to kind of replenish the depth on my 40-man. Well, I guess the depth stays the same, but it replenishes the flexibility on my 40-man, so those guys can stay on my team and in my system. So, and I'll go into those trades in a minute, but in doing that, I tried to target depth in the infield. And the reason I did that is because I have a lot of escalating costs coming up with my current Major League infield, and I don't really have a superstar out of, obviously, Armendariz at first base. So, Angelota's 28, and 4.8 million, and then he's due for 8.9, 11.6. Dude was really good last season. Before that, he was barely a bench-worthy player for me 2 seasons in a row. And his first, he's had 4 seasons. So his first, he was good. Second and third, he was bad. And then last year, he was really good. So it's like, okay, well, let's see how this year goes, because do I want to pay him $9 million? Not totally sure. So I added some depth at infield because of that, and because of, let's see, Sandoval is going to be hitting arbitration in a year. Sal Stewart next year, who just had a down year, set to hit arbitration, earned 7.7 in his first year. So I added some pieces that probably aren't starters and can't really supplant these guys, but they give me depth in case I decide to move on from some of these guys in the next season or two. So with all that being said, let's go to the major transaction log and look at some of those trades I made early in the offseason. And let's see. So the first one here, I traded Ricky Perez, who was like a 4th or 5th outfielder for me the last couple of years. You can see he's a pretty decent player, but he just never really did anything at the Major League level. You'd see 2030, 2031. He got good amount of plate appearances and did not do anything. Was really bad in 2031, but he's annihilated AAA. Like last year in AAA, after in 2032 at a 144 WRC plus. So he's going to go be a starting corner outfielder for the Dodgers, I'd imagine, and probably be decently effective. I'm just stacked at outfield. And then a nobody minor league pitcher, and I traded him for this guy. This is a minor league infielder, Randy Eads, who does not need to go on the 40-man. You can see a very good glove. He can play second and third very effectively, and also be a pretty good shortstop with that 65 range. He hasn't done much with the bat, but if he can develop kind of to what they think his ceiling is, he could certainly be a utility infielder on my team. Can't play the outfield, but that's one guy. And then I also pretty excited about this guy. This was the main guy. It was kind of, Ricky Perez for this guy, Benuelas, who, this is reliever. His stuff is I think is a 50 when he's a starter. But he's got great movement, which is good for Camden Yards. He's a ground baller, and he's moved up through their system. He did not pitch very well in his 47 innings for the Dodgers last year, but he's got 3 option years left, and he is a former second-round pick in 2028. Pretty happy to add him to my depth. I'm not sure he's ever going to be anything more than like a long reliever, maybe middle reliever, and like a starter in a pinch and injury. And he'll probably start this year in the minors, but feel really good about having this much depth. Quality depth to replace any injuries or things that happen. This would be a guy I'd be happy to call it to my Major League team if it comes to that. I also traded this guy, Kuls Holtheis, who was a first baseman without power in the minor leagues, but who hits really well, like a 140 WRC plus the last couple of seasons in AAA, but just have no room for him. And I got this guy, Sergio Serra, who is similar in that he's mainly a first baseman but can also play second. Not a great bat according to my scout, but had a really nice year in AA last year. So got him, and then also got this guy, Bob Guerra, who is another guy who probably is not going to develop into anything more than like maybe a really solid fielder on my AAA team. But the other guy I got for the bat, and this guy I got more for the glove. You know, Holtis, I was thinking I was going to have to DFA him, so I was happy to get 2 solid minor league players for him. Then Miguel Soto, of course, who has been in the minors the last couple of years after being a really solid infielder for me one year. It's like a 4-WAR season for me like 3 or 4 years ago. But I got this guy, Chris Sabag, who is a 24-year-old, did not need to be added to the 40-man yet. And he was decent in high A ball last year. He can play corner outfield positions well. He can play first base. More of just a flyer kind of guy. I was shocked that anybody would take Soto. Soto was like 32 and out of options. So again, happy to take a flyer on a minor leaguer who can, you know, probably be a pretty good hitter and for me at AA at worst. Then I traded a minor league infielder, Rojas, who's a great fielder, but was out of options, as well as this guy who was an intriguing pitching prospect who just never developed movement or stuff, but absolutely destroyed A-ball, and he struggled some as he moved up, but he was still decent in AA last year, but I don't see him going beyond that. And also a first baseman. This was just a guy they wanted who, you know, could be a solid defensive first baseman. I didn't really see a future for him on my major league club. So, and I traded them for Mike Esposito, who looks like a really nice second base prospect. Unfortunately, that's probably the only position he's going to be able to play. And his bat, you know, that it will hopefully his eye is okay. He's not going to hit for any power, but he could be a decent on base guy. He's been very good in the minors with the bat. You can see solidly above average. So again, that's just more of that infield depth. I just want options moving forward of like, well, I don't have to pay this average player $12 million in arbitration next year because I can bring up this guy, you know, something like that. And then I also got this minor league third baseman who could play second base fine too, and also can play in the outfield. And got him from Colorado. He was really good in A-ball last year, and then really good in low A and A-ball. He played at 3 levels last year and then struggled at high A. But again, another option in the infield moving forward possibly. And then I traded Mario Cuevas and Josh Hosch, 2 minor league guys who drew interest from a lot of teams, but I didn't really have a need for. And I got this guy, Telma Pradas, who really good catcher ability and a decent bat for a catcher. He might make the team as my minor league catcher. And my current major league catcher, Trujillo, is hitting arbitration. He's in his first year now, but next year he's estimated to get like $7 or $8 million. So if this guy comes in and looks like a decent catcher with this catcher ability, if his bat can hold up okay, he might be my catcher next year, and I can save $7 or $8 million at catcher next year. So that was the thought, getting him. And then did I get that guy? Oh, he already left as a free agent. I wasn't able to re-sign him, right? I think both those guys did, yeah. So neither of those guys would re-sign as minor league free agents, which it was fine. I just wanted Pradas. And then I did trade Ethan Weinberger. There was not a huge market for him, but, you know, my starting right fielder for the last several years is out. I got this guy, Dave Cope, 23-year-old. He's a reliever. Hopefully his control comes along. He can play the field, but he can't hit. But he was a recent draft pick, and he actually hardly pitched last year. Not sure why. Maybe they had him hit. I converted him to just a pitcher. So he looks like if he can develop any semblance of control, looks like he could be a really decent relief option. And then also got this outfielder who will be a decent corner outfielder, maybe could play center in a pinch, and has showed promise with the bat in A-ball so far. So those were all kind of the depth options that I added. Let's see, anything else happened? So yeah, so Sanchez, Corrales, and Patino all rejected the qualifying offer, blah, blah, blah. And let's go to December. I don't think too much happened. Oh, the Cubs came calling about this guy, Steve Martin, who was on my 40-man and just kind of, I don't know, you know, I have a 13-man pitching staff, and he was probably like 16th on my depth chart. He was a guy who would come up if I had a few injuries. And the Cubs came calling, and they also wanted an minor league outfield bat who's been a good minor league player for me, but I don't see him progressing. But they offered me this guy who, again, this is what I was talking about when I said I got depth at like the bottom of my depth charts. So this is a guy who will play in AAA for me as a shortstop, third baseman, probably development, second base. He's a leader. He'll be good there. And if I need him as a utility role, he'll be great in a utility role. He probably won't hit for anything, but as a defensive replacement, or if I get a couple injuries, like this guy could play third base for me for a month and not be like a black hole. He could be, he'd bat ninth and be bad offensively, but a good defensive guy. So that's more of that depth that I'm just adding. Martin was a depth pitcher. I would rather have the depth shortstop. And then also got this guy, because they're really interested in Martin and Monroe both. So I was able to get this guy from another good relief prospect. We'll see how he pans out. And then let's go ahead to forward to where I did make a couple signings. You can see I signed Chris DePaul to a 1-year, $1.5 million contract. And what he will be is my fifth outfielder. I decided that I don't want to bring up any of my young guys who are left-handed hitting outfielders to just sit on my bench as my fifth outfielder with how good my starters are, like Concepcion and Ortega and those guys. So I wanted to bring in a guy who was a veteran who I would feel I wasn't stunting their development by having on the bench. And this guy is a two-time All-Star. He won a Silver Slugger back in 2029 with a 145 WRC+. He put up some monstrous numbers. Then 2031, he was kind of average, and then last year he was quite bad. So I was able to sign him for 1 year, $1.5 million. I mean, if he hit the market 2 or 3 years ago, he probably would have signed like a $20 million deal after this 5.4 WAR season. So he's depth. I think if I have injuries, like he's a guy I would happily put in my lineup because he's shown he has a lot of potential. And in Camden Yards, he might be able to take advantage of his above average power. So, and then I also did sign Christopher Sanchez, of course, who has been my number 5 starter, but was out of my bullpen all last year because he was just depth. But 1 year, $21.5 million. So the annual value on this is high, but the key is it's just for 1 year. And he's got tremendous movement, one of the best movement pitchers in the league. He is 36, but he's an Iron Man. So in 2030, he pitched between Washington and Baltimore and put up like 3.5 WAR, and then in 2031 put up like 3.3 WAR between two teams. And then last year he just pitched out of my bullpen, but he was solid. Put up 0.7 WAR in 44 1/3 innings out of the bullpen. He'll start the season my 5th starter. I just wanted that extra insurance rather than bringing in young guys as part of the plan, and then if I had more injuries, I'd be totally screwed. This provides cover if I have a bunch of injuries. So you can see I did not bring back any of the big names. Patino, Corrales, and Amador all gone. So I will show you where they went, as well as some of the other big free agents. Oh, Dylan Carlson did just sign with Minnesota, 3-year, $31 million deal. He's over the hill now. So let's see some of the big deals. So St. Louis signed 2 pitchers on the 5th of December, 4 years, $140 million to Brandon Eisert, who's a former Cy Young winner, and 7 years, $201 million to Jonathan Monzon. So the Cardinals are trying to compete with the NL Central, where the Cubs, Pirates, and Brewers have all been top teams the last several years. And then here you can see Jesus Corrales did go to the Dodgers, 6 years, $132 million, $22 million per year. He's 29. He's fragile. They signed him, and he's almost 30. He's going to be 30 before the season starts, and they signed him to a 6-year deal. So I actually made what I thought were competitive offers to him. I gave him like 3 years for like 80 to 85 million. I offered him, I think it was like 30 in the first year and then 25 and 25, and he wasn't biting, and he wanted the 5 or 6 years. And so, they wanted that long-term security rather than the short-term money and then hit the market again when he's 33 and try to make up the rest of that money. So I did make competitive offers to him and would have liked to bring him back, but I was not at that age, and that injury was not bringing him back on a 6-year deal. It just wasn't going to happen. Cole Tucker, his deal with the Mariners is up. He's now with the Phillies. Luis Patino goes to the Houston Astros on a 5-year, $97 million deal, 19.4 per year. Just come down to the fact that he's 33, and I wasn't going to offer him a 5-year deal. So he's gone, got a qualifying offer. Uceda is a top pitcher in the league, and he went to Minnesota on a 6-year, $139 million deal. Halter, another nice arm. The Angels gave him 6 years, $151 million. This was a big one. Fernando Tatis at 34 years old. Defensively, not great. Still an awesome bat. and he goes to the Diamondbacks for 5 years, $190 million, $38 million average annual value. So, and I think, oh, and Adele Amador, where is he? Did I pass him already? There he is. He went to the White Sox, 6 years, $85 million. I was willing to go, I think I offered him like 3 years, $45 million, or 3 years, $50 million maybe. But again, he was another guy who just wanted 5 or 6 years. And he's 30, or almost 30. He's a wrecked injury history. And so I feel like my offer was about the most I could give was 3 years to him. I wasn't going to go beyond that, but we're fine. I've got Mike Angeletta to come in and be shortstop. Cincinnati signed a pitcher, and the rest are just one-year deals other than Carlson. So, yeah, that's kind of where the team stands. So pretty similar here, except Sandoval will be the everyday second baseman. Shortstop will be Angeletta. Backup role, Enriquez and some of those guys that I brought in on trade will compete. Nothing else will really change there. From how it ended last season. Pitching-wise, Caldera will step into the rotation after a boss season out of the bullpen with 3.7 WAR and 119 innings, 7 starts. And then Sanchez will come back into my rotation where he's been 2 of the last 3 years. And bullpen, all 6 of these guys will be back. And then the last 2 spots will be a competition between a bunch of young arms, and the rest will go to AAA and be depth. And, you know, if somebody gets hurt or Sanchez is over the hill and bombs out, I got plenty of guys who can come up, some of those who I talked about in the last episode, and I do still have $53 million to spend, or no, $73 million, and then $53 next year, but it's going to get real expensive real fast as all these guys are hitting arbitration, as I showed you. So that's all for now. I'll come back next and show you the preseason predictions and how the roster shaped up after spring training. Hopefully no injuries, knock on wood, and we'll get on with defending this World Series championship.